Call this meeting of the Person County Board of County Commissioners to order. Could I get Commissioner Powell to do our invocation, please?
If you desire, please pray with me. Heavenly Father, we're so grateful for this beautiful day, the gifts of life that you give us and extend to us, the health and strength and opportunity we have to come together here today to conduct business of the county. Pray your blessings on all that we do and may it be favorable in your sight. In your Son's name we pray. Amen.
Commissioner Puryear, could I get you to do that?
Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Are there any adjustments or discussion on the agenda? Hearing none, I'd entertain a motion to accept the agenda as written.
So moved.
Got a motion on the table. Is there any further discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Nothing means you're voting for it, right? All right, informal comments. We have 5 people willing to speak or want to speak. It be 2 minutes apiece. Adhering to our 10-minute segment for informal comment. First up, Susan Naylor. I'm sorry. Name and address, please.
Susan Naylor, 481 Valhalla Drive, Timberlake, North Carolina. I am here to speak on behalf of the Person County Senior Center. We do really and truly love the new facility that you have provided for us. We have increased up to about 200 to 250 people attending. In my class alone that I teach on Mondays and Thursdays, I have 25 people coming. Joyce Johnson, who is in our audience, she has about 30, and every morning from 9:30 to 10:20, I'll invite all of y'all to come. We will move and groove with you. And I would like to read something out of a devotion book that I read the other day. The balance of life is a life which, with variety in it, you need activities that challenge your mind to keep it sharp, and one that quiets your mind to keep your thinking clear and focused. Your body curves movement as much as it requires rest. And this is what our seniors center offers to our seniors. We have so many seniors who live alone. We have so many seniors who have gone through shoulder replacement, hip replacement, knee replacement. I have a lady sitting in our audience today. After her surgery, she can only move her shoulders like this, and now she can move them up like this due to our exercise. I have people coming up to me telling me how much this center means to them, and this is a wonderful, wonderful opportunity for people who live alone. And everybody in Person County can afford a fitness center. Everybody in Person County can't go to a gym. They don't have the money. And this is a tremendous place for them to keep their minds sharp. They meet people, and I just hope and pray that you will keep us in your budget. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Ms. Frances Blaylock.
Frances Blaylock, 1504 Searle Mount Terza Road. You've heard the old expression, unleash the beast. I'm afraid that you're just about to the point where you're going to unleash a beast that you cannot corral again. I have read all the information in your agenda packet concerning the landfill issue. And when I got through, I had a question still. Well, what happened to the transfer station option? Why did you throw that out the window? You've got 3 things listed there, but that is not mentioned, and it wasn't explained. So I called Raleigh. I talked to Ed Musler this morning, and I now understand what's going on. That's based on number one. I know I'm bringing up something you're gonna have on your agenda probably, Ms. Daycock, you're going to share that, but you're not gonna allow me to sit up here and talk, so I'm talking now. This particular, thing has that if we want to close the landfill and, open up a transfer station and take our garbage to Granville County, Upper Piedmont can remain open. We can't close them down. They can take in garbage until that site is at capacity, from what I understand. And that's the beast. And so we, as long as we have some semblance of a contract, we have a rein on them. And so I'm gonna ask you to think very hard about what you're doing. Number two does not allow any of us to say anything. There will be no public hearings. Number three makes them go through the whole process and deal with us again. So I hope that you will continue the year by year, as you've got stated on your agenda here, that you'll go by that year by year, and we can keep some rein on them. And I know that they will continue. We don't want to, as I say, unleash the beast. This new rule, the flow control and the life of site rule, no thanks to Mr. Yarborough,
ma'am.
has put a lot of this
2
on
minutes.
us. Is that 2 minutes up?
Yes, ma'am.
I'll come back to you later and talk about something else that I have on my mind. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Roy Brooks.
Roy Brooks, 383 Parsonage Drive, Timberlake. Stormwater again. We received a letter that we have to be inspected, as we have been every year previously, on our stormwater control situation. The original, quickly as I go through this, the original meeting was held at Helena Elementary School probably about 15 years ago. We discussed stormwater and got into this. It was stated then, and I think it's on the tape somewhere, that our stormwater fees that we pay were going to cover the inspection. In the past, I've always dealt with staff, and staff has taken care of the inspection of our stormwater pond. In the early days, Paul and them would call and they'd bring DWQ by because ours was always in good order. This is an ongoing situation every year. I understand, and I think everyone knows, that we already have county employees that are trained in the inspection of this, can do this job with already in-house. As of now, most of the people that got certified to inspect these that live here have let theirs expire because there was no demand for it, because it had been done by the county most of the time. So we're asking again, as we've been directed back to y'all, it is now stated in the stormwater plan that only residential ones are inspected by the county and commercial ones are not. That's kind of isolating us commercially because we do pay more more stormwater fees. I'm paying over $600 a year in stormwater fees. It looks like to me, since we already have county employees, they should be able to do this very, very simple one-page letter that we received. We have to do something pretty soon or I'll be out of compliance, but that's all that has to be filled out. It can't be so difficult. The same day I received my certified letter stating that we were out of compliance and we had to do this within 60 days, I also received a letter from EDC how they would like to help small businesses in Person County.
2 minutes.
Okay. A great way to help small businesses in Person County would be to do your stormwater inspection. Cost the county nothing, looks good, and it is good. We added $275,000 to the tax book on this site in 2017. We have a building permit for another building on this site. They're digging the footings right now. It's a win-win for the county. It takes no services. It's just all we ask, to be treated fairly as a small business. Thank you.
Miss Betty Blaylock.
Betty Blaylock from 144 Terza Ridge, Rougemont, North Carolina. I came to report to you, it's been some months, on the council 1 1/2 miles radius of this beast that we're talking about, the landfill. One of them that I reported last, when I was last here, has already died. 3 more have been diagnosed, that just I know about, just involved with our church, not the whole community. And one of those has already died. All of these are much younger than I am. Now, I can't feel too comfortable about it since though I live just inside the Neuse River Basin, the company is now just across the line with the Feeder Creeks. I must contact the Neuse River organization. Now, I don't just linger outside when the wind is coming from the northeast, and I don't hang wearing clothes out and linens except on weekends. So in my retirement, my weekends are now gone because of this beast. Now we will have to be on the lookout for them dynamiting going well below the water table, which they've already done. And the average water table in this area is 5 to 12 feet. The state was concerned 10 years ago about water table mounding underneath. That's because they've closed off all the springs and gone below the water table. So we have to watch out for the dynamite, because now that I've said Neuse River, they'll start dynamiting those springs up right away, I'm sure. They've been doing. By the way, my house is cracked from their last dynamite. The floor is separated in one. Now, house has been there 50-some years, giving me a break. The Mount Tirzah District has been called for 23 years now by the landfill. Many of our commissioners, the local newspaper, and even our local health department as insignificant.
2 minutes are up.
Okay, we are called sacrificial lambs by the neighboring counties, shrugs of shoulders by many citizens. But shockingly, the worst we citizens of this district have been referred to is this past week, I was informed by one citizen said one of the local current commissioners said that we were in the Mount Tirzah area collateral damage. God help us. Collateral damage. There are other options, and I've read the contract. They could have been shut down years ago of what they've done if we had the guts to sue them, and there's no telling how many millions you've lost because of it.
David Fike.
My name is David Fike, F-Y-K-E, 171 Robert Whitfield Road, Hurdle Mills, North Carolina. I'm here to speak briefly in regard to the home health and hospice of Person County. I've been there 11 years, first as part-time and then hired on as permanent full-time. If we stay open till August, I'll be there 10 years as permanent full-time. What I would like to say is part of the issue may be that persons do not know the differences between home health services on the one hand and hospice services on the other. For example, I, as chaplain, volunteer coordinator, and bereavement coordinator, have no interaction with home health patients except when I answer the phone or hold supplies for them. But I can identify a few things that hospice patients have access to that home health patients do not. Medicare hospice benefits allow for core services. Hospice patients get an opportunity to have a volunteer. Home health patients do not. It's optional at the admission of the hospice patient, or it's ongoing for the hospice patients. And some of you may know our volunteers, for the most part, have been retired women and men who have lived and worked in this county for years and want to give back to the county. Chaplain services are an optional service for hospice patients at admissions, or can be added on as we go on. Chaplain services are not available to home health patients. Bereavement services is a bundled core service for hospice patients. It's available to the family member or friend or facility staff member at any time, but specifically at the death of a patient. This may be a monthly letter sent to survivors from which a family member can opt out, or visits which a survivor may request, or the biweekly grief and loss group that persons may voluntarily attend. Basic bereavement support may be offered by the social worker for home health patients as a pre-bereavement risk, but is not technically a core function.
2 minutes.
Okay, please consider that. Thank you.
All right. Next on the agenda is discussion or adjustment of the consent agenda. Is there any discussion or any adjustments in the consent agenda?
Move for approval.
Got a motion on the table to approve the consent agenda. Is there any further discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? All right, item number 2, unfinished business, consideration of resolution of intent to authorize a request for proposal to explore the feasibility of the sale of the Person County Home Health and Hospice Agency. Just want to remind the council members and the folks in the audience, this is a request for proposal to go out and solicit bids and explore the feasibility of the sale. This vote is not to authorize the sale of home health or hospice or both. What is the pleasure of the board? Is there any discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I've thought about this a lot. Came over here and met with the health department group, and I think there's probably some improvements could be made in some of the operation of some of these things, but I understand the home health is completely different, as the gentleman that just spoke said. But for myself, I'd like to recommend that the hospice part be taken out and see if they can get that headed in the right direction. I think it is headed in the right direction for hospice, and that's a completely different animal from the home health. That's just my thoughts on it.
Yeah, Jimmy, I think the request for proposal, and Heidi, you can help me if it's correct, is to go out for proposals to sell one, each, or both?
It's to sell them both as a bundle. We actually entered into a contract in January that the board approved 5-0 to work with a consultant who would market the services, put out a request for proposal, and then bring the proposals back to the board. Now, once you have proposals in hand, you're required to conduct another public hearing. You'll recall that you've already conducted one public hearing as required by general statute. So you'll have another public hearing, and then you are able to negotiate any terms of a sale contract if you receive proposals. So then you would be negotiating terms of employment, a transition plan for our employees, obviously the sale price, the location of the business. All of that is governed by general statute, which says whoever does potentially purchase this would have to set up a local office here in Person County. So this item before you is simply to move forward with the process of developing a request for proposals, which then, as I mentioned, the proposals will come back before the board for consideration. But it is to bundle both services together as it stands now.
My apologies. I thought it was one each or both. I didn't know it was just for the complete sale of all. All right. Anyone else?
Could it not be that way? Or
I'm not sure. The contract that we have right now is for both. Perhaps we could amend that contract with the consultant.
I mean, you're just accepting offers, so could you not have a company put in an offer for
For a
what
single
they will pay for
service.
one, or what they will pay for both? Or
I think if the, I'm sorry.
Yeah, go right ahead.
I think if the board desires to, they could instruct solicitation for proposals either or both ways. I think another possibility is that you may get a proposal to purchase both, and you might want to negotiate with the person giving the proposal to see if they would consider buying one and not the other. I think there are two alternative approaches you might take.
The consultants had said that the home health service alone was not really enough to generate competitive proposals, that they recommended the bundling of the two services to get the best return on investment and a more competitive offer.
Understanding that this is just a request for proposals, if it's okay with the board, I'd like to make a motion that we move forward with the RFP on the feasibility of the sale of home health and hospice, and I'll make that in the form of a motion. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. All opposed?
No.
All right, ayes have it. New business. Item number 3, proposed contract for the volunteer fire departments. Ms. York.
I will start us off on this topic. As you know, each year, the county contracts with the individual VFD and/or rescue squad, so these are separate contracts for each one. The contract that we currently have in place for the current fiscal year is a 1-year contract. So we are in a position to renew the contract, and because, as you're well aware, the funding has increased so significantly for the volunteer fire departments in the upcoming budget, there have been some changes that some of the commissioners wanted to see in the contracts. So I'm putting all of the feedback I've heard from you all in terms of potential changes up for discussion this morning in hopes that we can have a draft contract to take back to the volunteer fire departments. And the potential changes that you have mentioned have already been shared with the Chiefs Association at their last meeting. So they are well aware of some of these changes. So I'm happy to walk you through each of the potential changes and get some feedback from you, or open to leading the discussion in a different way if you'd like. You want me to just start off and go through the list? So the first change, of course, would be the term of the contract. I've just continued to offer a 2-year contract, which is what we have had in place since I've been here, except for the current year in which the funding had been a debated issue. So the first item is the term, and if we go for a 2-year term, it would go from July 1 through June 30th of 2020. You want to talk about each one, or just go ahead through each one?
Could
Go through.
we, individually, I think it would be a good way to do it, so we won't have to backtrack a lot.
Okay.
Could we think in terms of just making that an ongoing contract until either party should decide to change or cancel, rather than rehashing this every year or 2 years?
The term of the contract certainly could be negotiated. As you know, we have an ongoing contract with the city of Roxborough for fire services. That is not up for debate each year. I think I entered into that maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and we've not had to change that much. That does have a inflationary increase built into it of 2% every other year. So that may be something that you'd like to consider. The only reason that we have done a more, a shorter term is that, you know, the nature of the volunteer fire departments. They're volunteers, they have a lot of turnover, where the city, you know, we're contracting with the city of Roxborough. So it's a little bit different, but you can certainly negotiate whatever term the board is comfortable with.
No, that's what I had asked for, was ongoing contract, so they understand the commitment that they have from the county. And we'll know exactly what we're funding, and since we're slowly moving to a fire tax way of paying them, then they understand that that's where it's coming from.
And so we could build in something like a 30-day notice for either party to make adjustments to the contract
I kinda
or
like that
termination.
idea, so we don't have to go through that.
What is the
every-
city? If the city wanted to renegotiate the contract we have renewing, it's longer than 30 days, isn't it?
I think so. Doug, do you know off the top of your head? I was going to say it might be 60 or 90 days.
I would suggest 60 to get.
Right, we don't want to be
They-
a month out from the budget.
Shouldn't they both be the same if we're
We
gonna
can
do
do
that?
them the same if you'd like. Okay, so I'll match that out clause with the cities. Okay.
And that does include a 2% increase
Is that something the
every
board
other
would like to
year.
do?
Is that-
I think we should put that back in place.
A 2% on the off years with the city?
Right.
So they would be up for a 2% adjustment next year. The VFDs would. Okay.
One point to think about, if we move forward with the fire tax, depending on the growth of the county, which it'll all work together, the larger the county is, the more needs the fire department have. But if you tie a fire tax to the amounts that the fire departments are getting, they could get a increase higher than 2%. So should we put something in there that indicates 2% or greater,
That's-
depending on which one is the greatest, either the fire tax or the 2% increase?
That would be the case if we had a true fire tax, but right now, we're dipping in two pots to get the total amount. So if we were getting that total amount out of the fire tax alone, then I see your point. But right now, we're only getting what we paid them last year out of general fund from the fire tax, and we're finding it in the general fund
So
for the rest.
660 plus the percentage that would get it to 1 million. Okay.
But if we were getting it all from the fire tax, then I understand that I would definitely be apt to doing something like that.
All right.
So for now, cap it at a 2% inflationary rate? Okay. Other changes include deleting a reference to any capital funding. We had established that several years back, and because of the increase in funding, that's no longer a part of the funding. It's all merged now into one pot. The second bullet for you is the additional requirement that some of you have asked for, which is to see some documented progress towards improving the ISO rating during the contract period. Now, this was based on a 2-year contract period when it was proposed, but we were thinking of having a written plan submitted by the end of the calendar year, so by 12/31/18, to our emergency services director, which would explain how it would talk about when they were setting their target date for an inspection, and how they would achieve a reduction in their ISO rating. So let me clarify, this is not committing them to an inspection and a reduction of their ISO. We're asking to see some documented progress in working towards having an inspection for the ISO
So
rating.
it's just essentially a plan.
We want to see a plan. We want to see that they're making strides, towards that.
Well, I think the ISO rating is probably one of the most important things to the taxpayer and the homeowners. They want to see something for the money they invest in, and I think that's understandable. With my research and talk with not only staff and people here, but Raleigh as well, I think you have to go about that realistically about the ISO rating, and I guess that's what they'll do. But it appears to me that it would probably take not a year and a half. It would probably take 3 to 4 years for this to come to fruition as far as countywide lowering of ISOs. So I don't see anything in here that's tied them to anything yet. This is just requesting a plan.
And I'm fine with all of them submitting some type of plan. I just want us to keep in mind when we're looking at progress that each department isn't created equal. So it's a difference in Triple
Sure.
Springs
That's why I
and
say-
Timberlake and
Some might do it in a year and a half, others might take 4 years,
Mhm.
but progress is what we want there.
Okay. The next bullet is for an additional requirement, ensuring that the department hold a minimum of 2 community-based fundraisers per fiscal year. I think there was some discussion among commissioners that we didn't necessarily want to see the additional funding be in place of community support through fundraisers.
Well, in mentioning that, my feeling was that, your volunteer fire departments are sort of a focal point to their community, and I think a fundraiser by them and with them is a tremendous community builder. It's a resource tool for them to gain additional funding for whatever their projects may be. It's a recruiting tool for volunteers, which are hard to come by this day and time. And I mentioned 2. I'd mentioned that to you previously, that 2 would be in order, because that seemed to be what they were doing. But if we're going to put any kind of requirement in there, I could change that to 1 very easily. But I would like to see them continue, is my point. Not necessarily 2, but I'd be happy with if they were to do 1.
Mr. Chairman, you can fix this by changing the word must, should.
Oh, yeah.
Department should hold a minimum. Must starts when it gets into legal terms. If you say and you require or you must do something, you hem them in. But if you put department should hold a minimum in there, you can, then if they have a disaster, suppose, and just before they're supposed to have a fundraiser, you have a hurricane or you have something in one area of the county like a tornado and they have to cancel it, and we got in our contract that they got to do it. And I know we probably could meet and change it, but just make it simple. If you say they should have it, then some of them start not doing it, then we'll take issue with it.
And just change the language to recommended. If you like, I mean, if that's what you guys like. I just think it's
I mean, that's just a thought.
good.
Somebody got a better thought, but I'm just thinking that it doesn't hem everybody in, but it does stick it out there that you need to be doing this.
Well, I would just hope that they would continue to do that for the reasons I previously stated, and we don't want to put a mandate on it because we aren't running those departments.
Well, I think all the departments can plan, the ones I've talked to plan on to do it because of the same reason you talked about. That is their link to the community. And so I enjoy my stew and barbecue. I can walk to my fire department and get it, so. Maybe we just put in there, it's recommended that they continue
Recommended is
community-based fundraisers and outreach.
Is everybody by acknowledgement okay with the change of the verbiage? All right.
Right.
Hear none.
The next one was something that our emergency services director threw in, which was that the department would agree to be a point of distribution site during our emergencies and disasters. This just helps diversify our locations for where we're able to distribute those resources when needed. The next is we are requesting that the individual VFDs would have their own contract for audit services. It would continue to be every other year, and it would be paid for by the volunteer fire departments rather than the county.
Would we have a list of approved audit companies that the county?
When we did it, we went out for bid for those audit services. I know some of the VFDs have accountants who can perform audits on their boards, so I had not given a required list of approved contractors.
Okay.
My thoughts are, is there a standard audit process? Is there something that we're looking for? Because if we went out to all of our VFDs and asked for audits without specific guidance on what the county and the taxpayers wanted to see, are we gonna get back 11 or 13 different audits? Or is there guidelines associated with the audit that should be sent so that they know what we're looking for, what the taxpayer's looking for?
Amy, could you?
Most basic audits include cash, from a cash basis audit. It looks at their cash, and most of them will hit on some internal controls as well, which is something that I think the board is always interested in, to make sure that fire departments continue to try and do diligence with their reporting and their collection of monies. And typically, I mean, yes, I think to answer your question, you could see some variance in how the reports are formatted, but most of them are going to at least do the basic audit for financials.
I can put out a
It
preferred
was just a thought.
format if you'd like, or come up with something to try to standardize the quality.
Certainly include some parameters of at least of minimum things that we want to see in their reports, and, you know.
Well, we might have 11 different people doing the audit for,
Sure.
depending on where they are. I think if we just set some minimum standards that we
Okay.
would want to see for the taxpayer, then I think that would be,
Okay.
it might help them
Sure.
do their preparation, not do something that they don't need to do, and it'll help us get just what we want to see.
And if you all are satisfied with the latest one that we did, we can sort of look at that one as an example and include the parameters that are included in those reports. If there's anything else in addition that you want to see, then you need to sort of let us know, but we can certainly use that one as a guideline.
Should there be a timeline? I understand every other year, I'm fine with that. Should there be a timeline, a deadline for them to have
Yes.
their audits in to the county?
Yes, and we'll match the deadline that we had in place for the current year.
Okay.
Or for previous years when audits were conducted. Yeah, we'll put a date in with that so we can make
Was it
sure.
one
they
every
have it.
2 years?
It was
Yeah.
every other year, and I think it was due at the end of March, I believe, or
Somewhere
March or
around
April.
early spring, yeah. That way, if there are issues, we can catch them before the next funding cycle comes up in the fiscal year. Okay, the last one then is the proposal that we discussed at your April 9th meeting, which was that the funds would be dispersed in such a way to give them the same amount that they're getting in the current fiscal year. So we're combining their operating and capital amounts. And then those are made available once they return the contract with the signatures and all the additional requirements that we have. And then the remaining amount of funds would be dispersed on a monthly basis. This is with the introduction of the new fire tax. They would get a disbursement beginning in March, so we'd have 4 months to complete the remaining amount of funding and a monthly disbursement to them from March through June.
Because part of that is coming from the tax line item, that was a
Right.
recommendation of,
Right, Russell had talked with us about a
Yeah.
true fire tax. You're simply dispersing the funds once they are collected. And we knew that we would not be able to provide them with a disbursement of funds until, maybe January, once people have paid their new fire tax. So we're fronting out of general fund the bulk of their funding and then relying on some of the collected revenues in the fire tax once those actual revenues have been realized. So it's a bit of a hybrid approach, but it doesn't leave the county holding the bag and taking on all of the liability by fronting the full amount up front.
Do you have the appropriated amount for each department? How are you gonna appropriate the 1 million?
That is a spreadsheet, yeah, in the budget document
Is it
that the
what
chiefs
recommend-
came
is
up.
that right? That's what I was gonna ask, is that the recommendation that came from the chiefs?
It is.
Okay.
We have not adjusted that at all. They've agreed to those appropriations themselves.
Right. The only thing I would add, and not necessarily for contract is, but it's my understanding that all departments are going through an inspection right now.
That's right.
If we have any that is, have problems with that inspection, that we need to hold county funds until they can pass inspection.
Okay.
And I don't know if that needs to come back to us separately or not, but, since we're giving that chunk out in the beginning,
Yeah.
I think it's important that we know they're gonna be in operation if, we're gonna give it.
Okay.
So with your.
They should be completed by July 1 is my understanding.
Yeah, I understand that too. So would you put because they can make changes and get in compliance, so would you take their amount, just put it in reserve and hold it until?
think we fund it, but
one
we
of-
hold
One
it.
of the two
Right.
come along?
Mhm.
Okay.
That'd be my recommendation.
That's a good one.
So either they come in compliance and they get their funding, or they don't, and it's
They
held
don't
in
get it.
reserve, and we'll make a decision then on what to do with it.
Mhm.
Okay. Thank you, Ray. Is there any further discussion?
That's everything I had on the list.
And we don't need to vote on this, it's just recommendations to go back for the contract and
Right.
move forward.
I think that's right. We'll get signatures from the volunteer fire departments, and then it has the chairman to sign once the budget has been adopted to ensure the actual funding amount is included in their contract.
Well,
how's that funding amount, excuse me? How's that set up right now?
660.
I'm sorry?
No, where are you gonna get the funding? Is it, you're reducing tax rate down to?
Yes. So once I'll present all that in the proposed budget, you all will have to adopt a budget, and then that will allow us to have the correct funding amount. But yes, the proposal is a reduction of the tax rate and the addition of a fire tax, which is what the board had directed me to do.
Still got time to change it, though, don't worry.
But I
We got
can't
till
put-
June 30th, right?
I can't put the actual amount in their contract until the budget has been adopted.
My toes are sore from kicking this can down the road. I'd like to get this thing resolved.
Field goal and get it over with.
Yeah, let's just do it. That's what
All
I'm
right.
thinking, but, so, yeah, okay.
We'll have
do
an
that.
opportunity to discuss that
Okay.
at great length moving forward.
All
So, item number 4, 1-year extension with the solid waste contract with Republic. Mr. Aycock.
Mr. Chairman and board members, you entered into, or your predecessors entered into a contract many years ago for the landfill. That contract provides for extensions for 10-year periods, or up to 10-year periods after the original contract period. We're into that period now. You, last year, extended the franchise for a 2-year period, but established a process for 1-year contracts, and your first 1-year contract expires June 30. Between what you did and current, the General Assembly took action which had the effect of foreclosing to you many options. They have, in a sense, taken the decision away from you by enacting 2 provisions. One's generically called the life of site provision, and the other is called flow control. In the life of site, it in effect provides that an existing landfill has a right to continue as a landfill for the life of that site. That, or up to 60 years, not to exceed 60 years. That has the effect of extending the life of any existing landfill without regard to an underlying franchise. The flow control provisions, not so much at play here, but have some effect, limit the ability of the county to direct the flow of waste to a particular site. All of these General Assembly actions leave you with effectively, I believe, 3 choices. Choice 1, take no action at all. Then Republic would secure a state permit for life of site up to 60 years to extend the use of the landfill. Pause just a moment. They are required to operate to have a state permit. There's another provision in the law that gives the state the explicit directions to issue a permit with few limitations so that it complies with the life of site. They have currently not secured that permit, awaiting what this board may do. But there is a requirement, I believe, in the law that the state must eventually issue that permit. So if you take no action, then they would ultimately receive a state permit for life of site, which would take it through potentially 2057. This would enable Republic to continue to receive waste and operate the facility without paying anything to the county. County then would receive no compensation. That's option 1. Do nothing, take no action at all. Option 2, Republic secures the extension of its permit to a life of site permit, and the county enacts a new franchise to comply with the new state permit and enters into a new contract to match that new state permit. In that case, the county would be entitled to the same compensation as is in the existing contract. That life of site permit that the state must issue is at the same tonnage, same rate as the existing. And the county would be entitled to issue a franchise for that period without the necessity of the procedural requirements of public hearing, examination of impacts, etc., to match the life of site permit. That would entitle the county to continue to receive the fees and in the contract provisions existing. There is in the law a provision that new life of site permit could be increased up to 110% of the existing. It is possible, and I can't tell you for sure now, that the county in this second arrangement, where a life of site franchise county contract to match the life of site, might be able to negotiate a different and perhaps increased franchise fee. But the law clearly states that the county is entitled to receive what it was receiving previously. Maybe franchise fee increase, maybe 110% increase in the tonnage. Third option is the county and Republic negotiate an entirely new agreement with different tonnages, different rates, different franchise fees. That would require still a new state permit, this time conditioned on the required underlying environmental impact and other studies, public hearing, a matching franchise agreement, and obviously if the county chose that option number 3, there's time involved in going through all those procedures. I am told by the engineering experts that often that time could go as long as a year to go through the environmental examinations, etc. In any event, the county, unless it wants to do nothing, needs to take some action with regard to the contract that is expiring June 30th. What the staff has put before you to give you that option, that time option to determine what you want to do, is to propose a new contract for another year which would match your existing franchise, and that is before you for consideration at this meeting. I think, Mr. Chairman and Board, I have outlined all the procedures in the memo that I gave you, though I gave you a 1-page on option 1, 2, and 3. I provided you lots of facts, analysis, and quotations of the law underlying those 3 options. I'll be glad to attempt to answer any questions that you may have.
So other than the 60 years, at 660 right now, at the current footprint of the landfill, taking 660 a day, how long before it fills up? Can they get another 60 years?
They indicated about 35 years at the rate they're going now.
So would it be
On the
safe to
current, on the current footprint.
on the
Yeah.
current footprint? So would it be safe to assume the 110% increase on tonnage, that'd be somewhere around 1,386 tons? That's 660 times 2 plus 66. I'm no mathematician, but I'm thinking I'm somewhere in the ballpark. So would that mean that if the current footprint, if you increase it to 1,386, they would fill it up in about 15 years and be gone?
I wrote the math.
18 years, you know, roughly.
Somewhere in that ballpark. I mean,
Yeah.
we'd have to get
I mean, you basically cutting it in half,
accurate.
right?
Yeah.
Any further questions for Mr. Acock? And again, before you right now is the one-year extension, because it's due at the end of June, and by doing the extension to match the contract with the franchise fee, it would give us the opportunity to discuss even further the different options that are on the table now. If there's someone here that would like to make a proposal that could be taken back to Republic, then we can also consider it. But basically, the item number 4 is just to do the one-year extension of the solid waste to match the franchise agreement.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make an admission and an amendment. The material sent to you previously on the proposed contract extension wasn't, it had some errors that needed to be corrected. The substance is the same. There's some wordage changes, so what you have before you is changing the words to correct some technical issues. The substance is the same. It just moves forward.
Any further discussion?
I would really be interested in knowing what the exact numbers are as far as filling it up. Because I know that time David Newell and I met with him, it was one number, and then when we got from the whole board, it was a different number. So I would like to know what their number is now, if it is 35 years under 660.
Okay.
And,
We can get that from both Republic and the state.
I think part of the difference is, my understanding is the compression rate that they've, or compaction rate that they've come up with inside the landfill has increased with technology, and that's one of the reasons that it's changed. Originally, we had a number that said if you stayed at 660 under the original footprint, it was a lot less, like you had indicated. And I think those numbers came from our consultant versus Republic. And then when we got into negotiations with Republic, the compaction rate was different than what we had anticipated or assumed. And that's where they came up with the 35 years. But I'll take your point and we'll ask that question.
I mean, I don't want them here to the next 60 years, and if I can keep them out to the next 35, I mean, 18 sounds better than 35. Definitely sounds better than 60.
Is it improper for a representative that's here to comment on that?
It's your call, Chairman.
You, Chairman.
Chris? You step up to the podium if you're willing to answer Mr. Jeffers' question about the difference between the original estimation of about 18 years. Seems like it was about 18 or 20 years when the
Yeah, when
consultant.
David Newell and I met, and our numbers came from y'all, not from the consultant.
Yeah.
But
There
it
is gonna
it
be
increased
variation.
next time we met, so.
There will be variation each year with the recalculation of the density factor. For instance, this year we had over 100 pound per yard, cubic yard increase, which gained 4 years of life. That number can fluctuate, really depending on incoming waste streams and things like that as well.
So if you're getting more metal than cardboard,
Right.
your compaction rates are different.
More dense material, yeah, or less, change that density factor. And then one point of clarification, the existing life of site permit, the 60-year number is from the original date of the original contract. So at no point are we talking any more than 39 years of this time.
I should make the point, the state legislation says you may go to the life of site not exceeding 60 years. That's where legal analysis.
From the date of the original contract.
The option 3, does that trigger a new 60 years?
I believe that it would, because you would be negotiating entirely new. It would be based upon the state permit, but I think it probably would. But I'll hold off on that until further analysis.
If you increase the tonnage intake though, that life span could further decrease. So I don't think the 60 years would come into play at that point either.
Well, I was talking about option
That-
3
that
because
would be
at one
a-
time we had heard the word expansion, which increased your number of sales. So I wonder if that then triggered.
It's my
a new 60
understanding that
years.
it would be a new permit. So yes, the new permit, new 60 years life of site. The waste footprint at that point would change, and it would be a major modification to the permit.
So worst case scenario, we know 39 more years. Worst case in my point of view. 39 more years.
Any other questions from the board?
But no matter what, under the Yarble bill, we need to do 1-year extension.
Yes, we
Period.
we
I
need
mean,
to do the
we
1 year
almost got to do that to keep our options alive.
That's right. So what's the pleasure of the board? Hearing none, I'll make a motion to extend the contract period for 1 year to match the franchise agreement that had been proposed earlier. And I'll make that in form of a motion.
If we proceed, if we look at an option 2, this would supersede the current motion. Is that correct, Mr. Attorney?
If I understand your question, the current motion would only extend at the current rate as it is. If during the time of that contract period, the board elects to go with what I've denominated option 2, you could extend that by another 10%. But this particular action does nothing except extend at the current rate.
Okay. Thank you.
Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, ayes have it. We extended the contract for a year to match the franchise, and then work on negotiations on 1, 2, or 3 moving forward. Item number 5, presentation of the county manager's fiscal year 2018-19
Before we go
recommended.
to the next thing, I just want to make sure we get those exact numbers from what we're.
Capacity
as far as-
numbers,
yeah.
yes. We'll get those. Brenda's going to pass out to you a copy of the presentation as well as the bound recommended budget document.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. Good morning, Commissioners. It is my pleasure to present to you your recommended budget for the upcoming fiscal year. We've been working on this for many months, and thank you for meeting with me last week to go over the fine print and details. I'm going to take the next few minutes to try to take that gigantic document and boil it down to some slides to help the public and our residents understand the high points of the budget. So in next year's budget, the general fund, which as you all know, but I'll remind other folks, our general fund provides us services that are funded through our property tax dollars. So next year, your general fund is $60 million, which is actually representing a 0.6% decrease. It's about $349,000 less than your current year budget. When you add in all of our other funds, like our economic catalyst funds, stormwater funds, person industries and recycling, just to name a few examples, then we're seeing a $66 million budget with a 0.7% increase. And your 1 penny for next year is coming in at $446,075. So this is up from 1 penny in the current year, which is generating approximately $438,000 per penny. So what does this mean in plain English? This is really just saying that there's very little growth in the county budget. We're actually seeing that the cost of goods and services and inflation is growing by about 2.3% per year. So you can see that county spending is not keeping pace with the cost of doing business. So in order to maintain our service levels, we have to make some reductions. In order to increase spending in targeted areas, we have to make some reductions in other places. Beyond just the numbers, this budget document really becomes the best tool that you have to tell the story of Person County government. In the absence of a strategic plan that has funding tied towards implementing the strategies, which we've not had since fiscal year 13-14, this budget has to reflect the board's priorities and really become a tool to communicate the values and the priorities of your leadership and the needs of the community. We pulled out all the tricks this year in order to get us to a balanced budget and implement the priorities that the board has given us. So I adjusted the collection rate. This is the second time I've done it since I've been here as manager. We're going from a 97.25% to a 97.5% collection rate. This will give you an additional $71,000, and as you know, when Russell brings his annual report, he's consistently around the 98th percentile. So this is something that we feel comfortable doing and helps bridge the gap here between revenues and expenditures. And then the tax rate next year is set at what the board has directed me to do, which was go from 70 cents down to a 0.6818 rate. And what this does is to create in next year's budget a loss of revenues of approximately $812,000. So if you were to restore the tax rate to 70, you would gain yourself $812,000. So what story are we telling here? We're telling a story that there's a priority here for a very low property tax rate. This is actually the board's 12th year without raising taxes. The spending increases have not been passed on to our taxpayers, but I do need to caution you that without additional revenues, we may not be able to sustain the services and the taxes. Here's a graphic depiction of what the tax base is looking like. I'm showing here from fiscal year 14 through your fiscal year 19. This is reflecting just extremely modest growth. I'm seeing only about 62 million in combined growth, but when you separate out the property tax, we're only seeing about $56 million in growth. And just to give you some context, in fiscal year 17, we saw about $100 million in tax growth, and that was a year where we had constrained spending. So we're only achieving about half of what we had in fiscal year 17 in your upcoming budget. So this is emphasizing my previous point and explains that constrained spending without growth in your tax base and revenues, it's really difficult to impact positive change. It's difficult to shift your priorities. You're stuck in sort of a status quo of needing to maintain your services without being able to have significant change. Each year at your board retreat, your funding priorities are agreed upon for the upcoming budget. This past February, the board identified the following priorities in this ranked order. Of course, 1 and 2, public safety being number 1, 2 being education, those influence 3, your economic development. The top 2 priorities here helped really frame the budget process. So both public safety and education have received increases in fiscal year 19. Public safety has consistently been the board's number 1 priority for several years. It's reflected in your funding decision, which is again how we put our funding where our mouth is. And this reflects an 8.2% increase in public safety going from current year to next year with the changes that we've implemented. So the spending increases listed here are what demonstrate the board's priorities. I have your creation of a fire tax. That rate is set at 0.0182. We've increased funding then for the VFDs to $1 million. We have 6 new positions that will support public safety priorities. We've increased the current expense funding for education. We funded all the capital for both the school system and the community college. And then you have your second year of fiber in your CIP, which was a cost of $3 million. So this is what you're communicating as the board's priorities.
Could you just elaborate on those 6, 4 being
Yeah.
our commitment to EMS? Just because we've
Sure.
had situations in the county where we don't have an ambulance available during the week.
That's right.
Since we have so many of our young at heart citizens.
Yes.
We want to iterate that.
Yes,
that
I have a
aspect.
slide that we'll get to in a minute that will break down those positions, but there are 4 EMT paramedic positions that are completing a half shift that we put in the current year. So when we put in 4 this year, we agreed that we would fund the remaining 4 to make a full shift to support EMS. And then there are 2 sheriff deputy positions in there next year as well. So that completes the 6. All right, so on the revenue side, we're seeing, I'm going to focus just on the general fund in this picture. So $349,000 less in your general fund compared to current year. The largest decreases on the revenue side include a $1.5 million to your DSS. Approximately $1.2 million of this is in the child care development funds, which is a change that the state has made. So those funds will no longer be passing through county DSS. The state will be paying the child care development funds directly. So that's a loss of revenue. The health department sees a $644,000 reduction, and then the property taxes are coming in at $390,000 less. This includes the adjustment to the collection rate we made and the other reductions here. The largest increases in the revenue then include the loan proceeds, which was for the purchase of 3 ambulances. Sales tax is growing nicely. I'm seeing about a 7% increase next year, which will net you approximately $565,000. And then EMS fees are also trending in positive. We have gained about 27% on our collections since we switched to a new collection vendor. So you'll see about $260,000 on the EMS revenues as well. Okay, moving on to the expenditure side, you see the matching decrease in the general fund related to expenditures. The largest decreases, again, you'll see the child care, the funding flowing out for that child care development funds, the health department, and then the VFDs. Now, let me not confuse us about VFDs. Again, we're focusing just on the general fund picture here. And so we're taking that $669,000 that we're currently funding out of the general fund for the volunteer fire departments, and we have put that over on the new fire fund. So it is resulting in less of a general fund payout to those VFDs, but overall they are still getting an increase, and there is still an appropriation from the general fund to the VFDs. I just wanted to clarify that so that that number does not get taken out of context and told in a different way. I'll also mention that I have cut from the proposed requests, the requests that came in, I have trimmed that down $4.3 million in order to get you to a balanced budget. The largest increases on the expenditure side then, what's left, again, the debt service is coming in higher this year. It's up $526,000 over the current year. This has been approved already in the CIP with the financing package that the board approved. Again, your CIP is growing $425,000 more this year due to that fiber project. EMS and sheriff, both of those are having increases, but I'll mention the new positions that I've already said. The bulk of those increases are attributed to those 2 positions. I'm sorry, 4 positions in EMS, 2 positions in sheriff. Okay, on to fund balance. The amount budgeted for your upcoming budget is set at $2.59 million. This is actually less than what you're spending from fund balance in the current year. I've mentioned some of the changes in the DSS budget, the health department budget also. You made a number of reductions to vacant positions in the middle of this current year. So those numbers in comparing year to year are driving down some of the need for the large fund balance appropriation. And also both DSS and health do have accumulated fund balances in their budgets. We'll be spending those down a little bit next year rather than your fund balance. And then this is telling our story that we are reducing a reliance on fund balance, with the last 2 consecutive years seeing a steady decline on the amount of fund balance appropriated in the upcoming budget. So here's the volunteer fire department slide. We have a full slide just to try to explain and clarify exactly how the funding is proposed for next year. Let's see. From the new fire tax line that is going to be on everybody's tax bill, that rate again is .0182. That will generate $669,000 collected to go to the VFDs. In addition to that, because the board had wanted a goal of $1 million of funding, there will be an appropriation from the general fund of $230,000. So that's that reduction number that you saw on the expenditure side, going from $669 in the general fund to $230 in the general fund. And then we also have a one-time appropriation that the state gave in their budget to support our volunteer fire departments. That's $100,000. And so that total gives you $1 million worth of funding, which represents a 49% increase to your volunteer fire departments. I also wanted to mention that with this new fire tax is a requirement in general statutes for you all to hold a public hearing. This is separate from your budget public hearing. This is just on the public hearing for a fire tax. That is scheduled for June 4th at 7 p.m. Next is the county workforce funding. So employee compensation. We have continued merit pay included. I think this is around our sixth year of having merit pay. And I have to say this is actually quite a bargain. When I look at other tools and, that can compensate county employees and what some other organizations are doing, less than $200,000 to continue merit pay provides for a 2% or 3% pay increase for our workforce. The cost of living adjustment that a lot of governments are fond of implementing would be a 2.3% and would cost the county $703,000. I'm not recommending a cost of living adjustment. I'm rather going with the performance pay that we have in place. This will be the third and final phase of our pay and classification study that we contracted with Springstead to do. This adjustment will be for general government employees. You'll recall that the first year we did public safety, current year we did human services, and then your upcoming year will be everybody else at a cost of $103,000. And then your health insurance for the board members and for county employees. We received a 3.5% increase on our health insurance. We had that number nailed down early this year, the earliest we've ever had it. And so we've had a really great time working with our new vendors at keeping that number low. We didn't start at double digits. We actually started at 3.5%. The total cost then that you'll spend per employee is $3.3 million to administer the benefit plan, which breaks down to about $8,000 per employee in terms of benefits on top of their salary. All right, on to education, the board's second priority. For Person County Schools, the current expense request was for a 7% increase. I'm recommending a 2% increase next year to their current expense funding. Some other categories of funding include their capital. This is current working capital for next year. This is different from what you've appropriated in the CIP. And then also their technology funds. Both the capital and technology, I'm fully funding their request, so no reductions were made to what they asked for. And here is the grid that shows you how those appropriations break down for schools. So if we were to fully fund the school's request, it would take an additional $470,000, so just a little over a penny to fully fund their current expense next year. And on to Piedmont Community College, breaking the funding down the same way. So current expense, they also requested a 7%, and I'm recommending a 4% increase. to their funding. Obviously, they're funded significantly less than the school system. They did also request working capital, and that fully funds their full request, so no reductions were made to that. And this is what their grid looks like. And it would take approximately $35,000 to fully fund their current expense request. So we're close. And then the final slide is kind of where we go from here. And I probably should have flipped these to make them in calendar order. So the first thing you'll have from here is going to be your public hearing. That's required by law. You're going to have both a budget public hearing as well as that the fire tax hearing, both on the same night in the auditorium. This has been the direction of the board for the last couple years to first hold the public hearing before any work sessions are conducted by the board, so that you're able to receive input from our residents before you make any adjustments to the recommended budget. So following that public hearing, you'll have two work sessions. You may have more, you may have less. I'm just proposing two to get on your calendar, and then depending on the significance of the adjustments as to whether or not we need more or less. So the first will be June 6th at 9:30. That'll be in here. And the second, June 11th, 3 p.m. That will also be in here. And my final slide is how our residents can access more detailed information than just what they're seeing here. We put this whole presentation, we put the entire recommended budget document on our website, and we'll have a link to that there. We also have copies of the full document in the clerk's office and at the library, and folks are also always welcome to call me. I'm happy to talk with them about specifics. And I'd be remiss if I didn't take the opportunity to recognize the work that our staff has put into this budget. We have a really outstanding budget team that makes my job so easy, with Sybil, with Amy in finance, and Laura as our budget manager. Of course, Russell in the tax office, Angie in HR, and then the team of department heads that we have who put together really thoughtful requests and allow us to bring to you a balanced budget that has never been easy. I'll say it's always been a challenge, but we appreciate the opportunity to provide that to you, and thank you, staff, for helping me with that. That's all I have, Commissioners.
Any further questions for Ms. York?
No questions. I would, well, maybe it is a question. One of your potential work sessions on June 11th.
Yes, sir.
I don't know what the board might think, but I have a Cardinal Innovations meeting that day in Chapel Hill. Probably will take all day.
I'm sorry. I thought I had approved all of these
Yeah,
through
thank
you
you,
all.
Ray. But
Very well.
I don't know, just consider an alternate date.
A different day for June
Just-
11th.
Yeah, just consider it.
Okay, I'll poll all of you and we'll come up with another day.
I think that was one that you had discussed, and I know you don't want to sit in meetings all day long, but we had proposed, I think the final outcome was
He likes it.
afternoon or evening. So, I mean, if we could fix it right now, is anybody
Sure.
opposed other than Gordon, who has to sit through an all-day Cardinal meeting and possibly come to a work session? Would anybody be opposed to moving it till later that evening?
I'll do that. Yeah, Ray, thank you, I'll do it. Ray
5
takes-
o'clock?
Ray takes
Five?
care of me.
Does 5 o'clock work for you?
What time,
Pay big bucks.
what time is your Cardinal done? It's an hour drive from Chapel Hill.
Hopefully 3 o'clock. It started at 8, so it should be done by 3.
So you want to put 5 down?
Okay, so
So
I'll
you get to
amend
sit
that,
down all day long.
send out a notice to you all, so 5
Meetings
o'clock
conference
on
call,
June
huh?
11th, which is a Monday. So a Monday evening should
You ought to
work.
Look at that.
Didn't
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. No action required on item number 5, so Chairman's report. I'd just like to reemphasize what Heidi just said about the staff putting together the budget for this year. A lot of thought, a lot of hard work goes into these budgets. I'd like to thank Heidi and Sybil both for leading the effort to get the budget before us. As the county can see, there's a lot of thought and a lot of time put into getting these to where we can try to come together as a consensus with all of us commissioners sitting up here voting on the taxpayers' behalf. So thank you guys for that. As far as my committees, I just want to send a shout out to Animal Services. I've noticed a big uptick in the number of animals that are being posted on social media. They're doing a really good job. We had a meeting last Thursday evening, and their adoption rate is really high. We have had the staff meeting other adoption agencies in other parts of the country, some coming from Maryland, and we meet those guys about halfway. So it's money that we're spending, but we're also taking care of the animals and making sure that they have homes. So with that, thanks to Animal Services and all that they're doing, and that's it for me.
Ron is actually on his way, Ron Shaw, this morning with an animal meeting halfway in, I think, Maryland. The only other report I could think of is to mention that the EDC and PCBIC group has their monthly meeting tomorrow. They begin at 4 o'clock, and they have changed the location. It's still at PCC, but it's going to be in D120, which I believe is near the Timberlake Gallery space instead of the S100 building that they normally meet at. And that's all I had.
Mr. Jeffers.
I had an environmental committee meeting. Huge discussion there was a litter on the side of the roads, and so I think you'll be hearing something or some recommendations coming from that committee. Last meeting we had law enforcement to come from the sheriff department and the police department to kind of discuss what are the fines, what generally happens to people that do catch, and sadly, so much of it depends on someone seeing it and being willing to go and take a day to go to court that day and testify they saw them throwing out some trash or littering on the side of the highway. So I think they're going to look at some type of county-wide efforts to bring to us later. Attended yesterday St. James Baptist Church right down in Leesburg. It was on the Caswell County side, but they invited Person and Caswell County Commissioner to bring greetings. They have a pretty good sized Person County membership there at that church. They were celebrating 150 years. And lastly, I'll be going next week for 15 commissioners from across the country were invited by our National Association of Counties to discuss some community health issues and kind of a peer-type summit, all paid for by NACO, may I add, not Person County. And so I just want you to all to be aware that I'll be attending that. So I'll be in meetings too, Gordon.
That budget's tight. We need to make sure the travel thing.
Glad my message got through.
Commissioner Clayton.
I'll make a short comment that I understand the problem with the home health hospice situation, but I do understand that the hospice situation is quite different. And I had a lot of nurses and patients contact me since we last discussed this, and I felt like if it was any way, I realized that what your proposal that you're asking for now, I don't know what it'll come back as, but that's one reason I sort of been holding out on the hospice part. I understand, quite honestly, if you were going to do what you really need to do, you would probably close home health right now and focus all of your emphasis on hospice. But if you don't know whether you're going to sell both of them or not, then I know why you're probably keeping home health open. But from what I saw in the budget hearing and the conference that we had with the health department, the home health end of it is what's really costing us. And quite frankly, if you phase that out right now, you would probably be saving yourself money, and you would also be able to take those personnel and put them over on the hospice side. So, it's a lot more to it than it looks like it is. And I understand money, but I also understand that when you got local people trying to take care of you, that sometimes it does make a difference. That's just my comments on that. Also, I've got an environment committee meeting in Raleigh tomorrow, so I guess we're all out and about doing different things. So,
Commissioner Purdy.
Just want to take a moment to thank Sybil for last week I'd received a call, a complaint about the construction crews going to the tower system, not having proper safety equipment, and it was causing some concern, and.
No signs either.
No signs.
I rode up on them kind of fast.
Yep. So, thank you, Sybil, for acknowledging that and getting in touch with the contractor to make sure that no one was hurting at it because of lack of safety.
Vice Chair.
One, speaking of meetings and traveling, I don't keep up with those things, I just generally go, but the airport manager here, Person County Airport, manager and I went to a meeting at RDU last week, and the short version of that is, with greater expansion at RDU provides more opportunities for Person County and Apex Airport, so we're looking hopefully at some expanded opportunities there for, and hopefully revenue. And the airport extension was approved last week, so we would hopefully see that come to fruition in about 3 years. And secondly, this board, I would like to say I'm very happy to see things progress along with the BFDs as they have to again sort of get them the funding that they really need to survive, because we need them and depend on them. And to see that progress, we're moving forward with that and get that sort of finalized and off the table. It's been around too long, so I'm happy, appreciate all the cooperative attitude and action that we've taken with that. Thank you.
All right. Thank you all. At this time, would entertain a motion to enter into closed session per General Statute 143-318.1184 for the purpose of discussion of matters relating to the location or expansion of industries or other businesses in the county, economic development, with the following individuals permitted to attend: County Manager, Ms. York; Clerk to the Board, Ms. Reeves; County Attorney, Mr. Aycock; Economic Development Director, Stuart Gilbert. Motion going to closed session?
So moved.
All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Carries. Anybody?